How do you plant potatoes for the best harvest? Today we're going to talk about it. G'day there, I'm Dana from Pewakaka Valley Homestead. Today I'm going to be planting the very first of my potatoes for the season. And here where we are, we're in the south of New Zealand. So potatoes that I plant now will be ready for new potatoes at Christmas time. These are some Jersey Benny potatoes that I grew last year, and I simply harvested them and kept them stored in my laundry, which is quite a cold space, somewhere cold and damp, and conveniently in the last couple of weeks they've just naturally started sprouting. Now you don't have to pre-sprout your potatoes before you put them in, but it does give them that little bit of a head start, and these ones have just naturally done it without me trying. So if you want to pre-sprout your potatoes, all you need to do is sit them in a tray or somewhere where they're just a single layer thick, and sit them somewhere where they get a little bit of light on them. In fact, these ones were actually in a dark cupboard and they still managed to sprout. And once they've managed to sprout at least a little bit, to be honest, this one here is probably a little bit too long, but that's alright. Just makes it more hard to bury properly. But once they get a few wee sprouted eyes on them, that means they're ready to plant. And as I say, you don't necessarily have to pre-sprout them, but these ones already have. So, and it can give them a head start. So I'm going to be planting these early potatoes in this corner of my garden. It might not be the sunniest spot, but it's also really sheltered and doesn't get any frost. So this is the garden bed that I prepared earlier in the year. Tucked it away for winter, so we're going to pull the cover off and I'll show you what's there. And under here, this is where I had kale growing last year, so you can see there is a few little plants there of kale which I will just pull out. Despite the black plastic, they're managing to continue to grow. There's some seaweed there that I threw on that has pretty much broken down, and I'm just going to plop the potatoes in around what's going on there. Now this garden bed I put 2 inches of fresh compost over the top of before I covered it in the winter time, and have just let the earthworms do their thing. And there are so many worms in this ground, it is amazing. The other thing I'm going to put in this garden bed right along the edge is something called potato onions, which are an onion that sort of self-replicates, and I want it over there because they'll be out of the way for the rest of my season because they're quite a long growing. These are my potato onions, and you put one in the ground and they turn into 4 or 5 of about the same size. Now for my actual potatoes, oh yuck, I just stood in that seaweed sludge. For my actual potatoes, I dig a nice deep trench, and if you push the compost to either side, it will give you something to cover the plants with later. You want this to be at least 4 inches deep, if not 6 to 8 inches deep. And then taking your pre-chitted potatoes, chit just means to allow the sprouts to grow. You want to place them sprout side up, so those things going upwards are going to be leaves, and bury them at least 4 to 6 inches deep. Now with those sprouts, you can leave a little bit sticking up out of the ground, because that's what they're trying to do anyway. With this really giant one, I'm actually going to snip it off so it doesn't stick up too much. And you want to plant the potatoes about a foot apart, or 30 centimetres. Potatoes don't need a huge amount of nutrition to grow, but of course the richer your soil is, the more you will get as a final crop. And they do prefer sort of loose, soft soil. However, growing a crop of potatoes is a really good way of breaking in harder ground as well. If you have unsprouted potatoes like this, it's really easy just to pop them straight in the ground as they are. After that, I'm pretty much just going to leave those potatoes to it. They will grow. I don't bother watering them in or anything. When we clean out the wood fire, I'll sprinkle a little bit of ashes over the top of them. They quite like the extra potassium. But basically we'll just leave them like that. Once the greens come up out of the soil, we'll use the compost that I've pushed off to the side to cover those up, and do that a couple of times. Often what I'll do is then mulch them with some straw or some hay over the top as well if I don't have any more compost, and that way the higher you sort of mulch those, the more potatoes will grow off the stems, so the bigger harvest you'll get. Just found one I missed. The Jersey Bennies are known as sort of first earlies. They're a really, really early potato, which is why I'm getting them in now. They usually don't store very well, but they are beautiful to have as new potatoes. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, hit the like button. Consider subscribing to our channel. We bring you videos twice a week on growing and preserving your own food. We'll see you in the next one.